All right, guys, Sam here with you. What is Wednesday, November 20? What is it today? November 28th. So Wednesday being a crypto day, we poll our members, and first up by request is a look at IOTA to the dollar. Now, this is much like Bitcoin and so many of the other major cryptocurrencies where we're working from the second pivot. So this pivot swing here to this low, we come to a perfect 50. Now, here's where this gets a little dicey. So here's the long-term algo target off of this 50, which is very much still in play. Unfortunately, look where 0 is. All right, right next to it. All right, so I mean, it's about as close as it can be. So, you got to wick that off just to be sure that you're not doing any projecting below 0. And you can see here, just from the way I have some of these fib tools set, we have projections below 0. All right, so we can ignore those. But looking at this, there's some tricky bits in here, so I can understand why members wanted to see get a look at this. So the first assumption here, excuse me, is that we're working from this pivot. We're completing a very large ABC. All right, so that's an assumption, granted. So how we end up, WXY, some other kind of a correction here that you could probably make a case here that you have a WX, and then we're in the process of a very long Y. I'm not entirely sure that it matters as to how we deal with this. I think what's more important is how we deal with this swing here. So from this, I think there's a reasonable case that we're in the process of putting in a big ABC. So if we allow for that assumption, then we're looking to complete this in 5. So from this pivot here, a pretty strong case for it. So let me go down. I'm going to zoom in on it here. So we'll work a little bit more closely here. So off of this, so first assumption is we come down here, we've got a good 1, 2. Then 3. Now this is all pretty straightforward. It's pretty much by the book here. So this got a little dicey here, and then the structure looks a little bit more like you might have an ABC, but we've definitely got an impulse there. If you have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, an extension in the 5th to get your 3 here. Very clean ABC, so I lean into this as the 4, although, if you open it up and look at it, there's a temptation to want to think triangle. All right, so something like this. Maybe, except the subdivision just doesn't work. It's not quite good enough to think, oh, I've got an A, B, C, D, E, something like that, right? So it's just, I think that's a possible alternate, but as I work through the subdivision here, I think that's less likely. So let's just break it down here and see if we can make sense of it. All right, so the first thing that I think is important is this is a very clear ABC, and it's technical as it relates to the rest of the Elliott count. So if I'm measuring here from the 2 high to the proposed 3 low, this little ABC takes us right to the 23. Right? So here in this sort of off pinkish color here, and we've got some prior support here, so we get a little resistance, a little structure there. So a nice ABC. Now it's shallow, granted, but between 23 38, that's the high probability zone for our third. We've got a little low volume node here over on the right here that you can see here, kind of pulling that over. We're right in sync with that. So then we start heading down. Well, now I got to go down to a 2-hour here to get into this subdivision. So if we look at this coming from this as the 4, on the assumption that I've got that correctly labeled here, I can get a nice clean motive wave here. It does appear that we have an expanded flat here in the 4. Right, so that would give us a 1, 2. All right, you can see there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into the third. So we've got our impulse in the third. Now A, B, right? Slightly expanded B wave here beyond the pivot of the third. A, B, C, we go into that for the 4 and then down for the 5. Well, then again, it's a question of what are the possibilities here? So if we've got a 1 that's in, we're looking for a 2 that would be somewhere between 50 and 618. That's our prime zone. We're not quite there. So if this is the 1, well, we get close. It's actually closer than I thought. Right. So that's a reasonable candidate here. So note we don't overlap the 1 here. Right. So if this had been, if the thinking being this was 3, 4. But I think this plays better as it's the only 2 that gets us a good 50%. So if this is in as a 5 down for the 1. I get a little A, B, C. We're a little shy of the 50, but close enough for a good 2. And then again, I go 1, 2. Seems more likely here. So we're already through the algo target off of this 50. So they've already been paid there. So, you know, some volatility here. They've got second target already. Third may be in the cards. So looking at that, if that's 1, 2, then I can go yet again 1, 2. Now I think, so I got to open this up a little bit so we can get some scale here. So if that's the 1 and that's the 2. Well, this is a potential third here because we're now longer than the wave 1, but I think this plays better that we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't overlap here, so we have the impulse to get the 3 down here. You know, we're closer to the 1,272. We don't make the 1,618 before we get a solid retracement. So I think that's a reasonable count here. So then, of course, you'd measure from the 2 high through the pivot of the 3 low. Right, and we right to the 50 again. So it's been very technical. So 1, 2, 3, we're to the 50 here. Now again, we've already got that target. And so we're blowing through some of these lower targets. Now there's a reasonable possibility that the 5 is in of the third. This would put us here. Right, so you can see that we've gone to third target here. So let me pull some of this off here. And we can definitely get a 1, 2, whether the 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like 5 is in here. We're still in a 3-wave structure here, so this is unresolved just yet, but the potential is here. So now putting this back together, we're looking for the 4 here. Now note, I've wicked off this prior low here as potential resistance. So let me take this one off, get it hot here. So if we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're done now, well, now we're measuring for the 4 relative to this 3 low. Well, note where the 4 comes in, right? So we have this structural confluence point here where we have prior support potentially there for some resistance right at the 3.8. Right at the 382. So the anticipation is that we're in the process of putting in an A wave. We're going to go B, and then if we're coming down here, where is that putting us? Well, you gotta pay attention to where 0 is. 0, so we're good. So we've got a little distance down here to 0. So this would be the first target. But remember, the bigger targets are down here approaching 0, where we'd be looking at second target relative to this. For an algo target, but we do have this here, so which is not unreasonable. So the possibility here is that we could resolve ahead of some of these larger targets. Now, you know, that's a little bit so, you know, do you want to try and pick the turn on that? Let me put it to you that way, right? So I think that's a little dangerous because the larger swings will have, what's the right way to say it? That will be the preference here that we'd pivot off of one of these larger dominant pivots rather than something that's so small here in the fifth of the fifth of the fifth of potentially the C. So I would not want to bet against this, as in start loading up here on this target, right? I mean, you may get a pivot there, and you might get a reaction there as the algos that sold, if we're going to get a sell here, right? Remember, we're hypothetical here. So I don't know that we pivot here for the 4, but if we were coming down here, before I started thinking, okay, the low is in, I'd want to, for me personally, right? So it's considering where we are, I'd want to see this. I'd want to see some sort of a motive wave come out of there, and then the safer play is to catch that. Right, catch the first retracement, looking for that. That's always my preference, rather than try and nail the turn when we've been in a 12-month bear here. So, because this would be, you'd be far enough on a front run here away from these targets that this I would be a little suspect of this being the hard low prior to going down to tag some of these larger targets. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but at the very least, if you wanted to trade off of that, if you're looking for the long side, at least take the first retracement so you can be clear about where you're wrong. So you know if this comes down, we take out this pivot, we're likely going down to these lower targets. So if you're just itching to get into a long position here on IOTA, I would be careful, right? So it's typically a major low like this is going to want to, it's going to need to be tested. Let me say it that way. So there's going to be, now maybe this kind of a thing can be a test But for us to just put in a hard low and then rock it out of this seems, well, it's always possible, but less probable than some sort of a basing period down here, a retest of the low, and then maybe you build a base which we can work from, and then we can get our, if you put this in the context of the larger picture, we could get a very nice motive wave coming out of here and still have a whole hell of a lot of upside. So there's no reason to be loading heavily down here trying to pick the turn. Again, if we're going to get a pivot, there will be plenty, and I mean plenty of opportunity to get long in this, considering where we've been. Right? So what was our high up here? 580. We're down here, 40 cents. Plenty of opportunity. Right? You can just looking at the scale here, where we're not even beginning to challenge some of it. So think about this. This 50 has been sitting here, but that algorithm is going to continue to sell, including beyond that 50, they'll keep selling all the way to this 618. Right now, they get on the other side of the 65, they got to flip, but that's a long way. Where we here, 328 from 40 cents, so plenty of opportunity to add along the way. No need to make the hero play and try and pick the turn. Just why? No reason to do it. Right? There's plenty of upside, so don't feel like you're going to miss anything. Right? Now, again, just approach with caution here. These are long trends, long-term trends, right? That 50, and same thing with Bitcoin. It's been sitting there. When did we make that pivot? May. All right, no guy sitting there going, I wonder if the low's in. It's just software will stay short until it gets that. So there's going to be continued pressure down here. Yeah, so just to be aware of that. So again, I'm not saying don't be a buyer down here if you see something that you like. I'm just saying you don't need to load heavily down here, right? Maybe a nibble, a little appetizer size. You get a nice motive wave, then talk about an entree size trade there. But right now, let this thing let's get a pivot, let's get a motive wave, then let a retracement. That will be tempting. All right, guys. So with that, I think. There's not much more I can add here. It's just kind of a hurry up and wait with crypto to see if we can start to get some traction out of these lows. I mean, this is, when you're that close to where you've got to be wicking off zero, probably says enough right there, right? No need to be overly aggressive down here. Okay, with all that said, I'll wrap there. So I'm going to try and get one more in for you because we've got another one that was requested. So approach with caution down here. Not that there's not opportunity. There is definitely opportunity down here. Just take it in measured bites. All right, guys, back to you in a little bit.